Lincoln Riley needs to recruit USC's own backyard and lock down the neighborhood.
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Holkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC. It's part of the Locked On Network, your first listen every day. Whether you're watching the show on YouTube, wherever you are listening to this podcast, it's free, and I appreciate your support. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And I'm using finger quotes if you're listening. How many times is Lincoln Riley and USC going to let the best of the West go play somewhere at a place not named USC? End quote. How many times have we heard USC fans talk about USC's recruiting like that? Watching recruits in USC's own backyard go to other places to play. Recruits that typically normally would stay home, play for their hometown school. And that's what I just said. That's a typical response. The standard response whenever one of the top prospects out of Southern California ends up picking Georgia or Alabama or Ohio State or Oregon. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe if USC was 8-1 or 7-2, maybe Hayden Lowe, the defensive end, the rush edge player, he would still be committed to USC. Unfortunately, USC hasn't adjusted to the NIL era, and not like other programs, not like the programs like Oregon or Ohio State have, and it keeps coming back to bite USC in the ass. Even when they have one of the local stars locked up, committed, they're not. That recruit is basically saying, all right, let's start the bidding war. I got the hometown powerhouse school. I'm committed to them. If I'm good enough to play for USC, I'm good enough to play for you somewhere else. How much? This is becoming a common practice at USC when it comes to recruiting. Take last year, for example, the 2024 recruiting class. You don't have to look far. You had Dakota Fields. USC was his dream school. The defensive back from Sarah in Gardena, California, down the street from USC, essentially. He was committed to USC. That was his dream school until Oregon showed him what dreams are made of. That's when Uncle Phil, Dope Knight, Nike, stepped up. He made Dakota Fields an offer he couldn't refuse, despite being committed to his dream school. Then later on in the recruiting process, in the recruiting cycle, right before signing day, in fact, the day of signing day, wide receiver from Millikan High School in Long Beach, Ryan Pelham. He took a last-minute offer, flipped from USC. He's now an Oregon Duck. And here we are a year later. If you're an everyday listener, viewer of this show, since spring, probably even further back than that, I've been telling you, I haven't been feeling the whole Juju Lewis commitment. The stud quarterback from Carrollton High School in Georgia, been committed to USC since August of 2023. If you were listening to yesterday's episode of Locked on USC or any of the prior episodes, that's about to change. Juju's going to end up at either Colorado, maybe Georgia. Auburn might be back in the picture again. The other day, I made the comment that USC's collective House of Victory, it's stepping up. They're funded. Well, what they've done is they've raised their spending budget. And I said that, they're going to pay whatever's necessary to hold USC's 2025 recruiting class together. That's what I was being told by a very reliable source, or two. One, House of Victory stepped up because they kind of have to. That's how things are done in today's world of recruiting. Again, you're not recruiting players. You're bidding for players. You're telling a young man and their family, I'm going to make you rich before you play down in college football. It is what it is. I mean, we just have to accept the fact right now that college football is a free agency sport. There's no rules. There's no guardrails in place. It is the wild, wild west. Everybody makes up their own rules, their own laws. Some people follow them, some people don't. So you've got that going on. And also, you know, Lincoln Riley and his coaching staff they've already got 5 losses. It's the second year in a row. And there's still more time. There's still more time this season for that number to grow. So that's affecting recruiting. Not nearly as much as the whole pay for plays type of situation, but USC's on the field production is playing a role as well. So I guess we can take the whole paying what's necessary, recruiting and keeping the best players in California. We can throw that out the door. As I mentioned a couple minutes ago, Hayden Lowe is no longer committed to USC. He decommitted and committed to Miami on the same day. Heck, I mean, the other day, Hayden literally said he had shut it down. Sean Nua had a nice conversation with him. Lincoln Riley showed up at his game last Friday. I mean, they were showing Hayden Lowe the love. Apparently not the right kind of love. The Miami Hurricanes are offering significantly more than USC is willing to. USC made him a really good NIL offer. In fact, they've upped it a couple times. Miami came in, said, hey, you know what? What if we give you $2.5 million over 3 years? USC wasn't ready to match that. They don't want to. And this is what Miami did after USC actually upped their NIL package. Not once, twice. But what Miami's offering is it's too much for the caliber of player USC views Hayden Lowe as. They don't see him as a franchise player, as a Dylan Stewart, the young man at South Carolina. Let's just play a game. Let's say USC was offering Hayden $500,000 a year. I have no idea what the number is. I'm just throwing out a number that makes sense. That's in the ballpark. That's the market rate for one of the top defensive end rush edges in the country. Miami's offer shadows USC's. It's not even close. And then take this into consideration. State tax. Hayden, when he enrolls in Miami and becomes a resident of the state of Florida, all of a sudden he's not paying state tax. What sucks the most about this situation, other than USC's got played again, this is a position of need. You've got a really good defensive coaching staff. D'Anton Lynn, Coach Henney, Sean Nua, Matt Entz, Doug Belk. This coaching staff made Hayden a priority from the start, from day one. And then they got him to make a commitment in June. Just let me tell you, for a fact, okay? I know there's other people out there throwing this content up there, USC content, telling you one thing. I can tell you, Hayden was one of the top priorities for USC from Jump Street. He was just as high as a priority as those guys from Georgia who committed and then decommitted. You know, talking about Isaiah Gibson, Justice Terry. Now, keep in mind, USC's coaches, they cannot comment on a specific player. They can't mention a player by name, not until they sign their financial aid paperwork. But after Hayden flipped, the young man literally had the audacity to say the following, quote, I feel like Miami has given me unwavering love since the start of my recruiting process. You know, since the start. USC hasn't really given me all in. I haven't really been their number one guy from the start. I became their number one guy when other recruits decommitted. With Miami, I've been their number one guy since the start. They love me. You've got to go where you're wanted. I feel like I'm more wanted in Miami than in LA, end quote. Let me respond to Hayden, since the coaching staff can't. When who decommitted? Make your words make sense, Mr. Lowe. Those guys back in the spring after they finished digesting their crab from the crawfish boil. Are you kidding? Those guys decommitted well before you committed in June. They decommitted back in what, March, April? I mean, if Miami was showing you the love and they were making you the number one priority, why did you commit to USC in June? I mean, you knew it back then, right? Why didn't you commit to Miami in June if USC was just dancing with you, but looking at others at the same time? Look, let's just say it out loud. The reason you flipped to Miami was for the money, nothing else. Miami's willing to pay him like he's a franchise player, like he's a Dylan Stewart. USC wasn't. They weren't willing to match $2.5 million for 3 years. Again, I brought up the tax situation. Don't believe for a second that's not how it's being sold, how these things aren't being played out. I mean, USC thinks that Hayden is a top 5 guy in the country at his position, and they're willing to pay him. Obviously, so was Miami. Both staffs consider him one of the top-ranked kids in the country. But USC was just not willing to go $2.5 million for 3 years. Back in the day, what, 5, 6, 7 years ago, when you were a kid, programs used to fill McDonald's bags full of cash to seal the deal. Now, bags of cash are the deal. That's it. There's no more dream school. How much are you going to pay me? How much money can you put in my bank account? Now, that's a huge shift from where recruiting was, where it was, to where it is today. That's a seismic shift. It chased Nick Saban out of the game sooner than he wanted. So where does USC turn to now with the early signing period? 3 weeks away, December 4th, that's when it starts. We'll talk about that in the next segment. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers, you can bet $5 and you're going to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and you can do it all in one place. Now, when you get a hunch in the middle of the game and you want to check out stats, head on over to FanDuel. You need to check out some live play-by-play highlights, head on over to FanDuel. You got a hot tip, you want to make another bet, head on over to FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Just visit FanDuel.com today, and you can join. You're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I have a USC novelty shirt packed away somewhere. I'll dig it out. It says, quote, at USC, we don't rebuild, we reload. And had a couple of 6-shooters on the end. It was a play on words that when Pete Carroll was the head coach, when he was the sheriff, USC recruiting, they just reloaded. They would just pick up a new batch of NFL sure shots, replace the ones that just got done playing at USC. As I mentioned in the first segment, recruiting has changed big time in the 15 years since Pete Carroll left USC. I mean, huge. So not only has recruiting changed, so has USC's winning ways, the lack thereof. So the sanctions did their part with recruiting. And then USC started using Coach Kiffin and Sarkisian to recruit. That was their strengths. To keep the pipeline semi-filled, with the limitations that they had. Pardon me. Two things. Well, Kiffin and Sarkisian both can spot talent, and as they got older, they become better head coaches as well. Different rabbit hole for a different conversation. So they did a great job considering the circumstances. Keep in mind, there was no transfer portal. NIL was still illegal at the time. Kiffin was too young for the job. Sark was dealing with personal issues, and then Clay Helton took over from there. By the time Helton was gone, NIL was legal, the transfer portal was around, and those two things to recruits, to college football players, the greatest thing since sliced bread. And while this is all going on, USC is circling the drain. That was all supposed to change when Lincoln Riley was hired. Lincoln Riley, USC's location, all of USC's rich alumni donating to the House of Victory Collective. USC going 11-3, winning a Heisman. None of that was enough. The Alex Grinch effect was still haunting USC. We got rid of Alex Grinch. Now you see what happens on defense this year. So now USC, Coach Riley, the staff, they're trying to rebuild. But right now, the way you have to recruit, Lincoln Riley, he can't afford the bullets to reload. That's the problem right now. It's not like they're not getting commitments from top players. They are. Can't keep them. They can't keep them because they can't afford them. USC has to go all in with NIL and be willing to pay. Otherwise, Coach Riley and the staff, they're gonna have to be content with Plan B and Plan C recruits, because that's what's going to end up happening with this class. Julian Lewis, I don't care. Walk away. Hayden Lowe, this one, you don't want to lose this type of player. Again, homegrown product, position of need. You were making the effort. You were going to pay NIL money. So with Lowe now out of the fold, going to be a Miami Hurricane. How is House of Victory going to use that money they had set aside for Hayden Lowe? Are they going to throw it all at Jakeem Stewart, the stud from New Orleans? Look, if Miami was willing to throw $2.5 million for 3 years at Lowe, what is Jakeem Stewart worth? And obviously, with that rhetorical question, is USC willing to pay it? You got to imagine he's got to be worth double what Lowe's worth. Close to it. So USC is still after Jakeem Stewart. You've got Kevin Wynn, the defensive lineman from the state of Georgia. He's coming for his visit. Just to remind everybody, his high school teammate, Stephen Miller, he's a safety. He's committed to USC. So now Kevin Wynn becomes a bigger priority. You were trying to add him to Hayden Lowe, to Gus Cordova. Now you're looking to add Kevin Wynn to Gus Cordova. You got to go back to the drawing board. You got to go back to guys that you cooled on, who you didn't make a top priority earlier. Guys like the 4-star recruit that's going to UCLA. He's committed to UCLA from St. John Bosco. Epi Sita Nalaya. You know me in Polynesian names. I apologize. I wish On3, I wish 24/7, I wish Rivals, I wish all the recruiting services would have a phonetically sounding spell out for these Polynesian names. Do me that favor. Please. Thank you. I'm begging you. It's not a big request. It's a lot easier than me trying to learn how to pronounce the Polynesian names by myself. Anyways, mini rant over. Epi, that's how I'm going to refer to him right now. He chose UCLA over Ohio State, Utah, Cal. One source told WeAreSC.com that he's probably going to be one of their primary targets going forward to replace Lowe. Charles Power, who is one of the talent evaluators for On3, he describes Epi this way. He's an active defender off the edge. In St. John Bosco's win over Chaminade Madonna earlier in the year, they played in Florida. The 6'4", 220-pound defensive edge showed good first step quickness as a stand-up pass rusher. He made several plays behind the line of scrimmage early in the game and played with a noticeable effort throughout the contest. Epi has always been viewed as a physically gifted prospect. He had a strong offseason on the camp circuit, and he could be primed for a big senior season at St. John Bosco. So we'll see if USC can flip Epi this late into the process. Or is Epi going to take the attitude of, well, you know what? I kind of feel like Hayden Lowe. I don't feel like a priority. Why should I come to USC now? That's what USC's up against. There's another target they're looking at that's coming in for a visit this weekend against Nebraska. 6'4", 235 pounds from Houston, Texas. He's another edge player. His name is Toby Hastrup. He's from Mady Creek High School. He's already taken official visits to Boston College, Missouri, Vanderbilt, Texas Tech, Florida State. And then he also has plans to visit, as I mentioned, USC this weekend, Michigan the weekend after, and then Oregon the last weekend of November. That's for a decision timeline from Toby. He said, before the first signing day, so around a day or two before I sign, I'll be making my decision made publicly. USC needs to get him on campus, make the hard sell, and then I'll be able to give you an idea of where USC feels with him. Let me close out this segment this way. Regardless of how the rest of this season plays out, remember, USC right now, they're sitting at 4-5. Coach Riley, he cannot, and I cannot emphasize this enough, he cannot afford to let the 2025 recruiting class fall apart. It's coming on the heels of 2 5-loss seasons in a row. Coach has to show the USC fan base, not only can he win these games coming up, Nebraska, UCLA, Notre Dame, he needs to show that he can win a recruiting battle. Because whatever credit he had built up in year one, he's getting close to being overdrawn with his credit account. Do you have tickets to the game this weekend, USC versus Nebraska? When was the last time you went to any live event? Well, if you need to buy tickets, you need to use Game Time. It's a great app. Game Time has this feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live event really easy. It's gonna remove all the bad tickets. It's going to show you what you want in your price range. So good tickets, best price, and check this out. You get to check out the view from your seat before you actually check out. That means there's no risk involved. In fact, there's another feature that I like about Game Time. Not only does it show you your view from your seat, but if you find a ticket in the same section and row for less, Game Time is going to credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms will apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So let's talk about the game coming up on Saturday for a few minutes. How is USC going to defend Nebraska this weekend? my everydayers heard me talk about it a little bit on yesterday's episode of Locked on USC. Matt Rule, their head coach, he brought in Dana Holgorsen to replace Marcus Satterfield, Nebraska's offensive coordinator. Satterfield was Matt Rule's OC at Rutgers, Baylor. He followed him along over to the Carolina Panthers in the NFL, and then over here to Nebraska when he took the job. Satterfield's offense tends to be more of a traditional pro style. Dana Holgorsen, who Matt Rule brought on as an offensive analyst 3 weeks ago, is a true air raid guy. So now USC has to figure out which offensive scheme to defend. That's the problem. Coach Lynn, after practice Wednesday, said this: you have to go off what you see on tape. Adding that this will be the first time he matches up against a situation like this. Obviously, watching some Houston stuff, what they were good at, what they did there, and then what they're doing at Nebraska. Pardon me, dang it. Just for 3 weeks ago, Holgorsen was an offensive analyst at TCU. Nebraska's offense sucks this year. Matt Rule hired him, brought him on, and he's bringing on a guy who was a head coach at West Virginia. He was a head coach at Houston, and he was let go from his last job, became an analyst at TCU. Matt Rule's rolling the dice and, hey, you know what? I need to do something with my offense. Come help us out. So Coach Lynn, the defensive staff, they're going to try and focus in on, whatever Dana's core offensive staples are. They can go look at film that he had, what they were doing at TCU this year a little bit, but mainly they're going to go back to the tape, what he did at Houston and at West Virginia. That's going to give them their biggest clues. So Lincoln Riley knows Dana, the air raid. He's very familiar with Dana. Again, both of those guys come from the Mike Leach tree. But USC has another advantage they might be able to tap into. Doug Belt, their defensive backs coach. He coached cornerbacks under Holgorsen at West Virginia, and then he served as his defensive coordinator at Houston before he came over to USC. So they get a little, they have, a little bit of insight to tap into. Coach Lynn said after practice that offenses likely can't, he doesn't anticipate Nebraska's offense to change itself in 2 weeks, but there are some changes that they can implement. He said, quote, it's tough to prepare for both. That's why you have to try and pick what he's going to try and do from his scheme, what he's going to keep from theirs. It's kind of a guessing game. At the end of the day, you have to go out there and just execute the call that's called. Bottom line is, hopefully, whatever Nebraska does in the first half, Coach Lynn and the rest of the coaching staff, they can adjust at halftime. For the most part this year, USC's been pretty good with their halftime adjustments. For the most part. We'll see what happens this Saturday. Both teams are coming off a bye week. Not sure if Dylan Raiola is going to be healthy to play. So USC's preparing for a couple of different quarterbacks as well. Now you're preparing for a couple of different types of styles of offense. Pro style, air raid, mixture of both. Like I said on yesterday's episode of Locked on USC. I anticipate seeing some trickeration, a lot of misdirection, getting USC's defensive players to have their eyes going one way and then the ball going another way. We'll see. I'll be back with another episode of Locked on USC tomorrow. That's what we do, 5 times a week. I'll have more updates on recruiting, more updates on the team, talk about the basketball team, how they finished up against UT Arlington. So until that next episode, everyone, you know what to do.